Hey, so it is Saturday afternoon and I had an incredible time at my church services this morning. It was actually quite interesting because quite an emotional weekend for me. In my church, there is a grassroots movement. I don't know if you'd call it grassroots, but anyway, it's called End It Now. It's a culture movement that is directly related to ending abuse and responding to abuse, particularly related to domestic violence and sexual abuse and emotional abuse and so on. And so one weekend out of the year is considered dedicated for a global awareness of the End It Now movement. And this year, that happened to be today, August 25th. Now, it's every local church in my denomination, it's every local church's option whether or not they would like to actually participate in creating awareness about that End It Now movement on this weekend. But honestly, in like way more years than I'm going to tell you exactly how old I am, I have never before seen a church take ownership and do a program on ending abuse like my church did today. So I was so incredibly inspired. There were times when I was in tears during the sermon. I have never heard a preacher when I'm sitting in the audience. I mean, I've listened to preachers about abuse and so on YouTube and podcasts and that kind of thing. But I have never heard someone in a church while I am right there listening nail principles of abuse like I heard it today. And you guys, it was a beautiful thing. My pastor deserves all the kudos for being so open to address this stuff. His message today is what inspired my video that I'm doing right now. So I notice I've got a few people on here. If you would like this, share it. Hit share at the bottom of your screen, and so you can pass it on. If everybody shares it, there will get lots of more people. And I would love for more people to get this, because I am going to walk us through the sermon scriptures that were used today that inspired me, and my pastor did not have a chance to really go fully and deeply into everything, but we're going to read the most gruesome story in scripture today, and that's Judges 19 and 20. If you've got your Bible, go get your Bible, because you're going to want to follow along. I'm going to move fast because I wish you could have been there too, Brenda. It was awesome. It is going to be a YouTube link, and I will post that YouTube link. So if you are just getting here, my pastor today preached on ending abuse culture and how everyone sitting in a church pew has a personal responsibility to step up and end abuse culture, because abuse starts at home. That was his premise. And because the overwhelming majority of abusive situations are most often perpetrated by men, I'm not saying, and neither was he, that women can't be perpetrators, but because of that, he challenged the men in our church congregation to take a stand. And one of the most amazing quotes that he did, I'm going to do a meme on this, you're going to see it on my page later, was, "Who cares if the world says it's manly if God says it's godly?" In other words, this whole machisto kind of culture, like, I'm the man and I'm big and strong and, you need to just like do what I say. And I know I'm caricaturizing and stereotyping, and I know a lot of men who are awesome and totally not like that. But the world does tend to just present masculinity, toxic masculinity, as like super rough and tough and like powerful. And yeah, anyway. Treating women as property and as conquests instead of as whole, valuable, equal human beings. So anyway, my Pastor Ricardo Barif, totally nailed it over and over and over again. And I have never heard this happen before either, not in my denomination, but there was applause at the end of the sermon. He ended the sermon, he had the final prayer, and before the final song was being sung, people broke out clapping, and I was glad to be among them, because it was a profound experience. So I want to, that's my little personal experience thing. And right now, if you have a Bible or a second screen, because I don't want you to go away from this video. In fact, I've got more people here. So if you would just like this and drop me a comment, say, I'm here, I'm watching, I love protecting the vulnerable, something along those lines, and hit share. That will push this out to more people and I get way more traction. And that would be super awesome. I have my Bible here, my favorite Inspire NLT coloring Bible, and Judges 19. So we're going to do a Bible study. Ready? Who's ready? Say, I'm ready on a comment if you are right here and you're ready. Judges 19. You know what? Judges 19, I think it's the nastiest story in the Bible, or definitely one of the nastiest stories in the Bible. It's horrifying. This is the story. Short version, the story in Judges 19 is where a guy takes his concubine, lets a bunch of guys rape her, and then when she's dead, chops her up in 12 pieces and sends those pieces to all the 12 tribes of Israel. That's the short version. It's gruesome. It's nasty. It's like, why? Why is this in the Bible? In fact, I remember a few years ago having a conversation with a friend of mine who's not a Christian anymore, and she was telling me that stories like this are what make her hate God. Well, I can totally understand that if you're looking at it from a perspective that God is the one prescribing this type of activity. But that is so not the case, and I want you to look at it with me. So, get your Bible open. Now in those days, Judges chapter 19, verse 1. Now in those days, Israel had no king. This is the first thing. In those days, Israel had no king. The beginning of this story starts out with Israel had no king. That means they had no dominant leader. They had no one judging the people and telling them this is wrong. Of course, Israel's had plenty of horrific kings as well, and kings who led them into idolatry. So that's not necessarily a good thing that they to have a king. But now I just want to bookend this because we're going to come back to that. Hey, thank you, Sonia, for dropping the verse in with the comments. That's awesome for the people who are following along. So we're going to bookend this. Judges 21 verse 25. That's the end of this section. And that is, in those days, it says it again, Israel had no king, and all the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. Now, if you go to Proverbs 14:12, somebody drop Proverbs 14:12 and Proverbs 16:25 in a comment for me. Proverbs 14:12 says there is a way that seems right to a man or a woman, doesn't matter, a human being, but the end of this way is death. So this is Proverbs 14:12, Proverbs 16:25. That's a cross-reference about what we do, what happens when people just do what feels good, whatever seemed right in their own eyes. Hey, random question. Have you ever heard anyone say, hey, if it feels good, do it? Whatever you're doing that feels good, just do it, right? We hear that all the time. Hey, I see new people. If you are watching this, please hit share at the bottom so more people can join in, because this is a super important Bible study, especially for the End It Now weekend against abuse. So this is stuff I pulled from my pastor's sermon, and I'm adding my own thoughts. So back to Judges 19:1. Now in those days, Israel had no king, and there was a man from the tribe of Levi, so from here on out, referred to as the Levite. And he was living in a remote area of the hill country of Ephraim. One day, he brought home a woman from Bethlehem in Judah to be his concubine. Okay, so first of all, he brought home a woman, and he wasn't actually marrying her. She was just his concubine. So then it says, but she became angry with him and returned to her father's home in Bethlehem. So the Bible doesn't expound on why she became angry with him. The Bible doesn't tell us what happened. I have not been able to study the Hebrew and see if there's some kind of nuance that would imply what she was doing to, or why, what kind of anger this was. I don't know if it was righteous anger. I don't know if she was just ticked off. I don't know if he was, but here's what I'm going to say just from reading the rest of the story. I believe that it was a safe assumption that he was a cold, selfish, and possibly abusive husband. What do you call the man? I mean, she wasn't a wife, so she's a concubine. I'm not sure what you call the guy in that situation. I don't have a better term than husband. So it is entirely possible, is all I'm saying, that she ran away to go back home to her father because he was horrific to live with. That is a possibility. I'm not saying that's explicit in scripture, but if you look at the way this man acts the rest of the time, that is entirely possible. So now, back in that time, for a woman to leave her husband and go back home to daddy, that was a huge sense of shame. Terrifically shameful. No woman would voluntarily, just for the fun of it, leave the man who she belonged to and go home to daddy, because she would be bringing shame on the whole family. So something had to have happened to make her run away. And so she was gone for 4 months. And then her husband set out for Bethlehem. The Bible calls it her husband, whatever. Her husband set out for Bethlehem to speak personally to her and persuade her to come back. And he took along a servant and 2 donkeys. When he arrived at her father's house, her father saw him and welcomed him and urged him to stay a while. So he stayed 3 days, eating, drinking, and sleeping there. And so now you're thinking here, so she ran away. Maybe she was young. Maybe she was scared. I don't know what. But clearly he loved her, right? Because he went after 4 months, he missed her. He went back to bring her home, right? Yeah, no. You will see later in the story just exactly how much he valued her. Oh yeah, he wanted to bring her home, but it was because she was his property, not because he loved her, not because he wanted to protect her, not because he wanted to take care of her, but he went to get her because she belonged to him. Because she was his, and it was shameful for her to have run away to go back home to daddy. So she was being persuaded to go back with him, her not quite husband, because she was a not quite wife, and erase the shame, make it all look pretty again. Ever heard that? We need to just make this go away and not rock the boat. Okay, so her daddy keeps telling him, hey, stay a little longer. Come on, stay a little longer. Come on. And by the time it's done, he's been there for 5 days. And finally, he says, look, I really got to go. And it's late in the day, so I'm going to sleep here tonight. And tomorrow morning, I'm leaving. Hey, Erica. Hey, Stephen. I see several of you. If you've just joined me, we are in Judges 19. We're talking about the most gruesome story in all of the Old Testament. And if you haven't hit share or liked this yet, please do, because it'll totally push it out to other people so that more people can benefit from the Bible study. And I'm talking about thoughts that were inspired by the End It Now sermon this morning at my church. So we are in Judges 19, verse 10. Pick it up in verse 10. This time, the man was determined to leave. And so the Levite and his servant and the concubine, they're all getting ready to go, even though it's kind of late in the day, which means they're traveling on foot, right? So they can't get very far, but he's going to get on the road. He's got to get away from daddy. Her daddy is like keeping him there the whole time. Makes you wonder, why was her daddy so eager for him to stick around? We don't have an answer for that. But hey, I like to ask those questions. I was an English major in school. I like to ask literary questions. It's just kind of my thing. So it was late in the day when, this is verse 11, they headed in the direction of Jerusalem, also known as Jebus. Jebus, correct me if I'm wrong. I am not a linguist. And the man's servant said, let's stop at this Jebusite town and spend the night right here. No, his master said, we can't stay in this foreign town where there are no Israelites. We'll go on to Gibeah or Ramah. We'll spend the night in one of those towns where there are, what? People like us. So there's this whole subliminal concept, this idea that, that people like us are safer than people not like us. Not always true. That people inside the church are safer than people outside the church. Also not always true. That people who look and act and sound like us and carry our racial ethnicity or our cultural affiliation, affinity, that those people are safer somehow because they're comfortable and familiar. Not true. And you will see why as we move on in the chapter. So they went on, they kept walking. It's getting later at night, right? They kept walking and they get to the land of Benjamin. This is where the tribe of Benjamin, ancient Israel, 12 tribes, tribe of Benjamin, the town of Gibeah. And they stop there to spend the night. So they rest in the town square. Now, it's a tradition back then. If a stranger's in town, you go, you rest in the town square, and then somebody will come and be hospitable and invite you home. No one took them in for the night. Nobody. Got no invitations. That evening, an old man came home from work in the fields, and he was from the hill country of Ephraim, but he was living in Gibeah. Now, remember, the Levite was from the hill country of Ephraim. And so this is like, you know, kind of an old kinsman and somebody from the same part of the country. And he saw the travelers sitting in the town square, and he asked where they were from, where they were going. And they said, well, we've been in Bethlehem in Judah. Remember, Bethlehem's where Jesus was born later. We've been in Bethlehem in Judah. We are on our way to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim, which is my home. And I've traveled to Bethlehem, and now I'm returning home. But no one's taken us in for the night, even though we have everything we need. We have straw for our donkeys. We have our own food. We have our own wine. You don't need to provide us anything. We just need a place to sleep. And the old man says, oh my goodness, you are welcome to stay with me. Just don't sleep in the town square. Well, it's interesting. Does this remind you, drop me a comment, does this remind you of any other Bible story? Strangers coming into town, sitting in the town square, a man comes and says, hey, what you doing? Where are you? How you doing? Come home with me. This town is dangerous. Don't sit in the town square. Anybody? Any takers? I'm waiting. There's some jet lag. There's some lag from the live video. But yes, so it is Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah. Same kind of story. So they go in with this old man. They sit with him. They are eating and drinking. They wash their feet off. They got clean from the dust of the trail. And while they're enjoying themselves, same thing has happened with Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah. While they're enjoying themselves, having dinner, a crowd of troublemakers comes and surrounds the house and began beating on the door. Bang, 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 and shouting at the old man, bring out the man who is staying with you so we can have sex with him. Now, I'm just going to put out a warning right here. I already said this is the most gruesome story in Scripture, at least in my opinion. So if you have small children around listening, you may want to shoo them out of the room. This is not a kid-friendly kind of story, okay? So these guys come, Judges 19, verse 22, and they're demanding, yelling out, bring out the man who is staying with you so that we can have sex with him. The old man stepped outside. He says, no, don't do such an evil thing. For this man is a guest in my house, and such a thing would be shameful. Now, it's not really super clear whether he thought that homosexual sex was shameful or just doing homosexual sex, like homosexual rape, to a guest in his house was shameful. And given the fact that there was no king and there was no moral code clearly among some of these towns back at this time in Israel, that the people were morally corrupt, it could be either one. It could just be like, hey, he's a guest. You can't mistreat him because he's a guest in my house. Or it could have been because it was homosexual rape that they were wanting to intend. Regardless, that's not the point of the story. Here, he says, take my virgin daughter. Oh, and this man's concubine, you can have them both. And I will bring them out to you and you can abuse them. He states it out loud, you guys. You can abuse them and do whatever you want to them, but don't do such a shameful thing to this man. Well, okay, so here we have a situation where clearly, as we already know, back in ancient Bible times, and at this time, without a king over them, without anyone setting a moral compass, anything went, right? Because people just did whatever felt good. As it said at the end on 21:25, all the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes, meaning if it felt good, they went for it. So here, the guy, the old man, is like, he's trying to stop the situation, but he's kind of weak-willed about it. I mean, kind of. He's totally spineless. He's like, hey, just don't do it to the guy, but, take my own virgin daughter who's going to have to stay here and live in this town with all of you. And for that matter, I'm going to volunteer his concubine. Take them both. Use them, abuse them, whatever you want to do. So self-preservation, not acting in protection of the vulnerable. But they wouldn't listen to him. Verse 25. So, and here's, Father of the Year. No kidding, Rachel. Good one. Here is where it gets even worse. They wouldn't listen to him, so the Levite took hold of his concubine and shoved her out the door. And the men of the town abused her all night long, taking turns raping her until morning, and finally at dawn, they let her go. At daybreak, the woman returned to the house where her husband was staying. She collapsed at the door of the house and lay there until it was light. Now, let's step back from this. She was so valuable to him, right, that he went and traveled from way up in the hill country over to where she had gone back to her daddy to bring her home. But how valuable is she now? First of all, he faced a choice between his life and hers. And who did he choose? Did he choose to protect her? No. Take her, do what you like, just don't hurt me. So when it came a chance for him to choose to be protective of the vulnerable, and even if you just want to look at it really crass and domineering, to protect his own property, I mean, he just traveled across the country to bring her home, right? No love there, because it was all about power, possession, domineering, and control. And when she became expendable as an asset to keep him from getting hurt, he was fine with it. So, she was not valuable to him. This is a direct application to so many abuse situations, because an abusive person may claim that they really love the victim. They may claim that they really want to take care of them. They may claim that they really want to build intimacy. They may claim that they want all these things. But you know what? When it comes down to it, if it's themselves or the victim, they pick themselves every time instead of sacrificing themselves out and showing genuine love to protect the person that they say they want to take care of. And so it's the actions that speak way louder than the words. Moving on. So, and just side note, he pushed her out the door and then he went to sleep. Did you get that? He pushed her out the door to save himself, and then he went to sleep. That makes me just see red. So in the morning, her husband opened the door to leave, and there lay his concubine with her hands on the threshold. And you know what he says? Not, oh my goodness, what happened to you? But, hey, you, get up, let's go. And she was dead. So he put her body on his donkey, and he took her home. Now, here's another thing. She returned to her abuser. How many times, if you work in abuse recovery on any level, if you are in any way involved with supporting those who have been through terrible relationships, domestic violence, whatever. And by the way, domestic violence is not just physical abuse. That is, Mindy, I see your comment. I will go back and look at it after I'm done with the video, but that's a good question. But domestic violence is an umbrella. It covers financial abuse, social abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, of course, what we always assume, but also spiritual, verbal, and psychological. I think I got them all. But yes, so but here's the thing. She had already left him once. That didn't work out so well. And so when he pushed her out, pimped her out to a crowd of rapists to be gang raped, where'd she go when she was done? She came back to him. Why? Because he was still safer than everywhere else that she felt like she could go. That's really, really horrifying. But it's only horrifying when you're on the outside looking into an abuse situation. Many, many times abused women try to leave and then go back, and other people on the outside cannot understand it, but it happens over and over, an average of 7 times before a woman actually takes steps to leave an abusive situation. A huge part of that is because any form of abuse relationship, abuse situation often includes psychological and emotional and mental breakdown, so that the person believes that they deserve it, or they believe that it's normal, or they somehow have been taught to interpret those abusive things as a form of love. Or they're just absolutely terrified of how they would survive and start over, or even just being killed by leaving. So there's a lot of reasons people may not. Wow, Wendy, you totally just derailed my train of thought. We should talk. Send me a private message. Wendy just said that she has someone in her past who is now a youth minister and has an abuse history. I'm so sorry that you've gone through that. And that really, really breaks my heart. Man, I hear it a lot. So, okay, back to our story. I know this is a long one, you guys, so I'm really, you know what? I'm not sorry. This is a good one, and it means that I'm going to have to download it from my phone and upload it on my laptop, because I can't upload from my phone anything longer than 15 minutes. I'm already past that, so I'm going to keep going now. So here's the next thing. She's back with her hands on the threshold as though she's reaching out to touch him, trying to find a safe place, even though he's the guy who pimped her out. Wrap your mind around that for a second. And he comes out, not a shred of empathy, not a shred of compassion. Basically, in my mind's eye, the Bible doesn't specify this, I can almost see him like kicking her with the foot and just like her hands. And he's like, hey, why are you here? I'm about to trip on you. Why are you doing this? Get up. Come on. Let's go. He puts her dead body on his donkey and he takes her home. When he gets home, he takes a knife and he cut the concubine's body into 12 pieces. And then he sent one piece to each tribe throughout all the territory of Israel. Now that's absolutely horrific. Horrific. Like, who does that? Does that make him a serial killer in his own right? No, it doesn't. It's completely out of comprehension in our today's kind of environment. But back then, it served as notice and proof of the crime. So it's incomprehensible. And remember, Israel was without a king, so the Levite is also doing whatever just seems to be right to him. This is not that what he did was a good thing. He's an abusive pimp. I mean, he just saved himself at the cost of her death. So he sends one piece of her body to each tribe throughout all the territory of Israel, and everyone who saw it says, such a horrible crime has not been committed in all the time since Israel left Egypt, in hundreds of years. Think about it. What are we going to do? Who's going to speak up? This mirrors what happens when people find out about an abusive situation so often. And hey, if you're watching and you haven't shared it yet, would you just hit share at the bottom of your screen, please? And just post this over to pass it on to friends so that more people can see the video, because this is so important. And it's all about the End It Now weekend against abuse. So that would be super awesome. And also just hit like or leave me a comment underneath so I know that you're here. So everybody all throughout Israel is incensed, right? They're just furious. And then all the Israelites, this begins chapter 20. If you've got your Bibles, Judges chapter 20. Then all the Israelites were united as one man, from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south. Those are names of cities, including those from across the Jordan and in the land of Gilead. The entire community assembled in the presence of the Lord at a place called Mizpah. 400,000 warriors armed with swords. We're talking nearly 500,000 men took their positions in the assembly of God. Word soon reached the land of Benjamin, where this had happened, that the other tribes had gone up to Mizpah. And the Israelites then asked how this terrible crime had happened. So they started an investigation because they're outraged. And you know what? Again, I'm really not sure whether they were outraged at the death of the woman or outraged at the Levites' loss of property. That is not entirely clear, but either way, they were outraged at the crime that had been done. But here, listen to what happens next. So we were wondering, like at the beginning, right? Did the Levite really love her? Is he going back to fetch her home because he really misses her? And here is our final proof. In case him pushing her out the door to pimp her out to a gang rape crowd is not enough, here's our final proof that he doesn't care at all. It was not about her best good. It was about his power, control, property. The Levite, the husband of the woman who had been murdered, said, "My concubine and I came to spend the night in Gibeah, a town that belongs to the people of Benjamin. That night, some of the leading citizens of Gibeah surrounded the house." Notice, he doesn't say a bunch of thugs. He says some of the leading citizens of Gibeah surrounded the house, planning to kill me, and they raped my concubine until she was dead. Does he leave out a few bits? Oh yeah. So he upgrades it from a crowd of troublemakers, which it said before, to leading citizens. And then he says they were planning to kill him. They weren't. They just wanted to have sex with him. And they raped my concubine as though he had nothing to do with it. He conveniently omits the fact that he's the guy who shoved the concubine out the door to be gang raped to save his own skin in the first place. So is he honest? Does he have a genuine sense of innocence and righteousness? No. He has false righteousness, a projection of martyrdom as though he was somehow the poor trapped guy in this situation who he leaves out all of his own inhumanity, basically. He makes himself look like the victim instead of letting them know that he was also the perpetrator. He is projecting an incredible sense of false righteousness. And then he says, "For these men have committed a terrible and shameful crime." Well, I'm sorry, who started that crime? He did, when he shoved her out the door. So he ought to have received the same judgment that they did, but he didn't, because he wasn't dishonest about his role. "Now then, all of you," this is Judges 20, verse 7. "Now then, all of you, the entire community of Israel, must decide here and now what should be done about this." He's like, come on. You need to have justice for my property that was taken away from me. And all the people rose to their feet in unison and declared, "None of us will return home. Not even one of us." This is 400,000 warriors. 400,000 warriors. "Not one of us will return home. Instead, this is what we will do. We will draw lots to decide who will attack Gibeah. 1/10 of the men from each tribe will supply the warriors with food, and the rest of us will take revenge on Gibeah of Benjamin for this shameful thing they have done in Israel." So all the Israelites were completely united, and they gathered together to attack the town. Now, typically, when we read the story of the Levite and the concubine, and she gets chopped up into 12 pieces and all of this horrifying stuff, when we do that, we just end right there. I remember hearing about the 700 elite left-handed slingshot troops in Benjamin and thinking, oh, that's so cool. The tribe of Benjamin had 700 left-handers. My daddy's a lefty. I thought that was so cool. It never occurred to me. I never tied the two together, that these elite troops came out to fight Israel on Israel's punishment of Benjamin for what the Benjamites had done to the Levite's concubine. So anyway, all the Israelites were completely united. Verse 11, they gathered together to attack the town. But you know what? They did a little bit of parley first, and they gave him a chance. Before we slaughter you and condemn you all, they gave him a chance. They sent messengers to the tribe of Benjamin saying, "What a terrible thing has happened. Give up those evil men. Those troublemakers, we will execute them and we will purge Israel of this evil." They were willing to not actually fight Benjamin, the whole tribe. They just wanted to punish the abusers as was appropriate for what they had done under Mosaic law. So they offered due process. They said, hey, we have 9/10 of all our 400,000 warriors from all of the 11 tribes remaining of Israel. And due process, we won't fight you if you will hand over the perpetrators. And Benjamin said, yeah, that'd be a no. We're going to protect our guys, and you can bring it on. Well, now, listen to what happens with Benjamin. So, first of all, the Benjamites, they're kind of cocky, right? Benjamin, the tribe, has a ton of elite warriors. They have 700 elite warriors who live just in Gibeah. They have 700 elite troops out of the whole group that could sling a rock and hit a target within a hair's breadth without missing. They had 26,000 of their warriors armed with swordsmen, arrived to join the 700 elite troops who were there. Benjamites were kind of like, they were kind of like the SEALs. They were like, the Marines, the Navy SEALs, they were the front guys. They were the elite. They were the best trained out of all of them. So here in this, we have the Benjamites who are ready. They're like, you got 400,000? We have 26,000 and our elite troops. Bring it on. 15-1. We will take you down. Benjamin didn't care that they were facing nearly 500,000 in opposition. They were going to protect the perpetrators at any cost, and they felt strong enough to be able to do it. They weren't scared a bit. They were clearly amazing warriors. But here's where they went wrong. Instead of handing over the perpetrators for proper, appropriate discipline/punishment, actually straight up execution, they said, no, they're our guys. These are our boys. They're from our tribe, and we are going to protect them. We don't care what they did to that vulnerable woman. Now tell me, if they did that to that vulnerable woman, was that probably the first time that they did it? No. Was this a pattern of behavior before they got that public in order to come and bang on somebody's door and then gang rape all night long? Absolutely. So this is an established pattern of behavior. This is not their first time doing anything like this. This is where they have shown who they are and what their character is like. And Benjamin's leaders still refused to enact discipline and consequences to what these guys had done. They chose to protect and enable the perpetrators and to close ranks around their good old boys. So, before the battle, the Israelites went to Bethel and asked God, which tribe should go first to attack the people of Benjamin? Notice, this is the first time, because there is no king, this is the first time in the entire story that someone goes straight to God and asks God, what should we do? And God answers them. He says, Judah is to go first. The Israelites left early the next morning, camped near Gibeah. They advanced to attack the men of Benjamin, but Benjamin's warriors who were defending the town came out and killed 22,000 Israelites on the battlefield that day. The Israelites encouraged each other and took their positions again at the same place and that they had fought on the previous day, for they went up to Bethel again, wept in the presence of the Lord until evening, and they asked the Lord, should we go fight against our relatives from Benjamin again? And the Lord said, go out and fight against them. So now the Benjamites, they're first of all, they're elite. Second, they're pretty cocky. Third, they're protecting the perpetrators, and they fought back fiercely to keep the abusers safe from punishment. In fact, there were 26,000, and in 2 days, they killed 22,000 the first day, 18,000 the second day. So they've already killed at more than 1.5 times their own number in the first 2 days. And Israel is just like, oh my goodness, why do we have to fight these? Why do we have to fight our own brothers? These are our family. They're our church friends. They're our fellow leaders. They're our brethren. Why do we have to fight them? And God said, don't stop. Go back and fight them again. Do not stop until the evil attitude of protecting abusive people is eradicated. At the end of day 2, they went up to Bethel. They wept in the presence of the Lord. Again, they fasted until evening. Were they getting pleasure out of this? No. They were absolutely broken-hearted that they had to fight their internal brethren, because usually it's all us against them, right? It's us against the outsiders, the world, the pagans, the heathens, the idol worshipers. And now it was civil war. It was them against each other for the purpose of a righteous cause, for the purpose of eradicating an entitled, power-driven abuse culture. So, day 3, the men of Benjamin came out to attack. They were drawn away from the town, and as they had done before, they began to kill the Israelites. About 30 Israelites died on the open fields and along the roads. I mean, that's nothing next to the 40,000. Sorry, I'm not good at math. I have to still count on my fingers. 40,000 that they had already killed in the first 2 days. So 30 Israelites were killed on day 3, and they shouted, "We're defeating them just like we did before." But the Israelites had planned in advance to run away so that the men of Benjamin would chase them along the roads and be drawn away from the town. 15-1, and they were so powerful and elite that they still needed strategy on the part of the Israelites in order to win on any level. Now tell me, what does that tell you about the Benjamites? Not only were they fiercely protective of their own perpetrators, they were also powerful, they were elite, they were leaders, they were extremely confident and highly manipulative, and their hubris was their Achilles heel. Chew on that. Somebody who's watching, make a list of those. I'm turning the page. Judges 20, verse 33. When the main group of Israelite warriors reached Baal Tamar, they turned and took up their positions. Meanwhile, the Israelites hiding in ambush to the west of Gibeah jumped up to fight. There were 10,000 elite Israelite troops who advanced against Gibeah. The fighting was so heavy that Benjamin didn't even realize the impending disaster. So if you have just joined us, I know a few people just got in, hit share at the bottom, click like, drop me a comment, and just say, I'm here, I'm watching. And we are in Judges 19 and 20. We're in chapter 20 right now, going through the most gruesome story in the Bible and talking about how it applies to modern day abuse situations. So the fighting was so heavy that Benjamin didn't even realize the impending disaster because they're so used to winning. They're so used to not being threatened. They're so used to not having anybody push back on them. They're so used to protecting all the perpetrators and getting away with it that they don't even realize they've pretty much all been wiped out. The Israelites killed 25,100 out of 26,000 of Benjamin's warriors, all of whom were experienced swordsmen. Almost a complete wipeout in one day. And then finally, the remaining 900 men of Benjamin saw that they were beaten. At that point, they retreated. They had arranged to send up a large cloud of smoke from the town as a signal. When the Israelites saw the smoke, they turned and attacked the remaining warriors of Benjamin that day. And then it breaks it down in verses 44 and 45. 18,000 strongest warriors died in battle. The survivors fled into the wilderness. Israel killed 5,000 more along the road. They continued the chase until they'd killed another 2,000 near Gidom. And so that day, the tribe of Benjamin lost over 25,000 strong warriors armed with swords, leaving only 600 men left. 600 who escaped to the rock of Rimmon. That means they must have had a couple of hundred with the first couple of days. So the first couple of days, they killed 40,000. They only lost a couple of hundred soldiers. Now, there's only 600 men left. And at this point, the Israelites returned and slaughtered every living thing in all the towns, the people, the livestock, and everything they found, and they burned down all the towns they came to. Do you know why? Because they insisted on protecting abuse. The entire tribe paid a phenomenally, heartbreakingly heavy price for choosing to protect perpetrators of rape against the vulnerable, instead of choosing to enact godly, biblical, appropriate discipline and consequences when a heinous crime against the vulnerable had been committed. Not only that, though, Israel had to come together to tell them that they had done wrong. Israel had to find the courage to go up against the elite, most confident, most experienced, most skilled warriors out of all the 12 tribes. They had to fight the best among themselves, the most powerful, the most confident, the most skilled. They had to face up to the best warriors among them. And they lost 40,000 minimum in the process. And each time they went weeping at the heartbreak of having to battle against their own extended family, their own cousins. God said, keep going. Keep going until it's done, and I will hand them over to you. Do not stop while they are still protecting the perpetrators and endorsing an abuse culture and refusing to change the way they think. In the end, all of the rest of Israel swears that, of course, all of Benjamin is wiped out except for that remaining, Judges 20 verse 47. The remaining 600 men. And all the other 11 tribes, they're like, we will never let any of you marry our daughters. Oh, and by the way, you're not allowed to marry anybody from outside of Israel either. And you can't marry any of ours because we know how you treat women in your family, and we're not letting that happen. It's interesting how they went about finding wives to repopulate the tribe of Benjamin. That's not really why I'm going to skip over that, because interestingly, I don't see anyone going to God unless I'm missing something. I think they went back to just doing whatever felt right to them. In chapter 21, Israel finding wives for Benjamin, there's no mention, at least unless I'm missing something, there's no mention of them actually saying, God, how would you like for us to help repopulate the tribe of Benjamin? The only place in these 3 chapters that they went to God and asked for an answer is when they were asking whether or not they actually had to finish the battle to eradicate those who were protecting the perpetrators of abuse. And then when they went on to find wives and repopulate the tribe, I think they were just, again, going right back to having no king and all the people doing whatever seemed right in their own eyes, because it doesn't seem like consistent with God's character of how he would have them go about that kind of thing. My whole point with this, though, is, well, I think I've made a few points. And I just kind of ran to the end of my thoughts. Oh my goodness. I think it speaks for itself. I think that we can take this, we can apply it, the same principles, to modern day times. And here are those. Some of those are, that's right, Sonia, righteousness and justice are the foundation of God's throne. If you've been following along in my Jesus bubble, we've been going through every morning, going through Isaiah, and over and over and over again, God says, he will be a tower of refuge to the poor, to the needy in distress, and that he will bring people to an awareness of justice. He will give them a longing for justice, Isaiah 28:6. He will give a longing for justice to their judges. He will give courage to the warriors who stand at the gates. And as we look at that, how we extrapolate from this from this heinous, horrific, just terrifying Bible story that we could just, obviously, I have a friend who said this is the story that made her not believe in God. It could be looked at that way, but we can also see actually principles of God's character. God was outraged that this woman was treated so badly. We see a clear pattern of a manipulative, deceptive, abusive husband in the actions of the Levite. How he dominated, controlled, preserved himself by putting her in harm's way, and then isolates himself out of, protects himself from taking any responsibility for it by leaving out his role in her abuse. And then we see good, godly men, 400,000 of them, standing up and saying, no, we will not let this happen. We will not stand by while an entire tribe of our cousins and our brethren are going through living in an abuse culture and exploiting the vulnerable shamelessly like that. And then we see how Benjamin, they just closed ranks around those abusers, and they said, no, we're not handing them over. We would rather fight for our pride than hand over the perpetrators of this horrific crime. We are going to protect our own. And so those leaders, those elite, that good old boys club, they closed ranks around each other and made sure that they did not hand down biblical justice. And as a result, tens of thousands on both sides suffered. And the tribe of Benjamin was almost completely wiped out because God brought them to humility. And that is how God feels about those who protect perpetrators of abuse. They are complicit in the abuse themselves. And every time Israel begged, dear Lord, don't make us go back and fight our own family over this, God said, go back out and do it again, do it anyway, and I will hand them over to you. They have to learn. I've said it over and over again. One of my great friends, who is also a counselor, Nicole, she is the one that I first heard this from, and it's just so applicable. Pain is the tool that God uses to teach us to hate sin. And we have two choices. We can either learn from somebody else's pain, or we can learn from our own pain. But if we do not allow pain to teach us to hate sin, then we will not confess that sin. If we do not confess, we will not repent. And what we do not repent, we are destined to repeat. In that kind of case, the most loving, merciful, kind thing you can do to someone who is perpetrating abuse on someone else is bring them to feel the consequences of their own actions, because they clearly have not learned from the pain they caused, which means they must, if they're going to have a chance at salvation, they must learn from their own pain. And a codependent approach of sheltering them from their pain is actually going to enable them to continue hurting others and sinning with impunity, which is destructive to their character and just does not bode well for their potential future choice for humility and choosing salvation and choosing to hate sin. Those are my thoughts for the End It Now weekend against abuse. If you enjoyed this, please share it. Please pass it on. If you run a page or you have other groups or whatever, you are absolutely free to share it. I would love to hear your thoughts and comments on it. I will be uploading it to YouTube you can share it or embed it for people who are not on Facebook. And over the next couple of weeks, as I have time, I'll probably turn it into a blog post with a lot of the written points. So if you haven't gone and liked my page, please definitely do that. That way you will see the other things when they come. And check out the other videos. There's a lot of other videos on that. If you have a question that you would like for me to answer, or a Bible passage you would like for me to study through, especially on things related to leadership development, helping the vulnerable, and pushing back against exploitation, drop me a comment or send me a message. I would love to hear from you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and thank you so much for hanging out with me as we went through this very long and detailed study. I really appreciated you being here with me. Have a great day.